Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are logging in from. So, so happy to have you, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Man Bear. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Everyone, please send a message if you can see us live so that Tammy and I know that we are actually live, as I always say, that we are not just imagining that we are live. So let's see. So I am looking for some comments somewhere, either on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you happen to watch us, listen to us. Do send us a comment, say hi. Hi, everyone. And Tammy, thank you so much for joining me early in your early morning there.
Well, for me, it's early. For some people, they've
Yeah, I
probably
know.
been up for hours, but for me, it's about 8:30 in the morning on the East
Yeah,
Coast. And
yeah.
I'm not a morning person, but for you, I am here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Uh, Welcome, everyone, to 32nd episode of Growth Mindset Conversations on breaking through obstacles to your leadership success. Please do join me in welcoming Tammy Gooler. Let me introduce Tammy to all of you. Tammy Gooler is the author of Work from Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles, and Design a Career That Fulfills You. She's a career and executive coach, speaker and facilitator with expertise in career transitions and leadership development. Tammy's clients represent many sectors and industries. Tammy's weekly podcast, Work from Inside Out, showcases career transition stories of people who found more meaningful work. Her expertise has appeared in Forbes, Fast Company, the Boston Globe, Harvard Business Review, SN. Tammy holds a BA in psychology from Hampshire College, Amherst, MA, and an MBA from Boston University, Boston, MA. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you so much once again. And your podcast, Work from Inside Out, is wonderful. I do follow that podcast and
Oh,
the series of conversations you do.
well, thank you. And you were gracious enough to be a guest on the podcast some time ago. So I appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us live. Please feel free to ask any questions during the conversation with respect to the topic. And you can write in your questions in the comment box. Let's start the conversation. So, Tammy, the first question always is, as the show is called Growth Mindset Conversations. So, what is growth mindset for Tammy Gooler?
Well, the growth mindset for me is always staying open and curious to learning new things, whether it's related directly to the work I'm doing today, looking
Mm-hmm.
to broaden my horizons, whether it's for my own work or to learn new things on behalf of my clients. So I think that's huge for me is curiosity, is just
Mm,
not narrowing my options in terms of what I can learn. Sometimes I have to narrow my options because I get curious about too many things and then I get stretched too thin. I do that a little too often, but that's my growth mindset is really just enjoying learning new things and then incorporating things as I go along.
yeah. And bringing that balance, you said, that is also part of growth mindset, right?
Well, that's a big grow. I would call that a growing edge mindset.
Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
I've been working on that quite a bit lately, trying to
Mm-hmm.
stay in a few distinct lanes within my business so that I can really provide full value, not just to my clients, but to my
Mm-hmm.
audiences, so that I can really
Absolutely.
provide, you know, powerful messages that people can take away and use in their lives. And if
Yeah.
I'm spread too thin or I'm trying to do too many things at once, I can't be of any value to anyone, including
Yeah.
myself. So
Yeah.
that's something that I'm working on quite a bit. And it's funny how you know these things, for years and
Yeah.
years, and yet
Yeah.
it's a lesson I need to keep working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved how you described it, growing edge mindset. Wow.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Jamie, so we are talking about obstacles with respect to leadership success.
Yeah.
So, based on your work, what you do with executives, career transitions, and recently you have written a book, Work from Inside Out.
Yeah.
What are some of the main obstacles that keep people from fully realizing their leadership potential?
hmm So some of the things that seem to get in the way for people when they're trying to emerge further as leaders, and I think of everybody as having
Mm-hmm.
leadership capabilities, no matter where they sit or live in an organization or in their lives, and yet there are things that they aspire to grow themselves as leaders. And yet there are circumstances that are either within their control or beyond their
Mm-hmm.
control. And sometimes they will perceive things that they believe are out of their control. And they will name them and say, oh, I can't do this, or I can't reach that place as a leader because of this circumstance or that circumstance. And
Yeah.
they'll stop themselves, or they'll make assumptions about things, make up stories about things that they think they can't reach or do because of that. So, for example, in the book, I name a number of things in that way. So, um, one of the areas that I look at is age. I have a number of clients and people I talk to regularly who will say, "Well, I'm too old." You know,
Yeah.
they won't want to promote me or move me to that next level, or they'll think that I'm too old. I'm not with the times anymore.
Yeah.
They make assumptions about how they think others are perceiving them. And so they hold themselves back really more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I see a lot of that. And so I challenge people on those things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I in the book, I offer many stories of individuals who really moved beyond those kinds of obstacles. So for
Yeah.
example, I share
Mm-hmm.
a story of a cousin of mine who decided to go to law school at the age of
Mm-hmm.
48, passed the bar exam, and became an attorney at the age of 50,
Yeah.
and practiced law well into her 60s. So, she was a leader in her community in many, many ways, and then grew in the field of education, actually, and then grew as a leader, as a lawyer in her community. But there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways that people get their minds set about what leadership should look like. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, a lot of people grew up thinking, well, I'm supposed to follow this pathway. It's linear. I have to go from A to B to C, and it's got to stay in this lane and in this pathway. And so if they find themselves maybe being interested in taking a fork in the road, maybe to the left or to the right in a little bit of a different direction, they
Yeah.
sometimes hold themselves back and don't allow themselves to expand their knowledge or their skills in other directions, thinking that they're not going to be able to advance in the way that they imagined because they're
Yeah.
deviating from some kind of linear path, when in
Yeah.
fact they could actually expand themselves as leaders by learning new things in other areas. And so
Yeah.
it's really about having that more open and curious, expansive mindset, but they hold themselves back in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And what I'm understanding is the main thing is the narrative, the story I'm telling myself. It could be age, it could be your own limiting beliefs, it could be anything, but it's
Yeah,
about all about story, narrative, our perceptions from
right,
for our world, how
right,
my world look like, right?
right.
I'm having that lens in front of me, how
Yeah.
I'm looking at. And that's a beautiful point. And perceptions and narratives are a big part of, how I work with executives and leaders. And I
Yeah,
really, yeah, love that. And you
yeah,
also said, you challenge those perceptions or those narratives. So perception and narrative is a problem statement, so to our audience today, if you have to give them an answer, maybe some how do people find their way around these obstacles, these perceptions?
Mhm.
If you have to give one or two pointers, what
Mhm.
would you share with them?
Sure. Um, so I would say that if you find yourself feeling at all stuck in a spot, where you feel like there's no movement, you're feeling at all dissatisfied or unfulfilled, or as if, you know, you're not moving where you want to go, and you start to tell yourself what's not possible. Take a step
Mm-hmm.
back and really allow yourself to think that through. And I always encourage people, I say this in the book probably more than once, don't do this alone. Run it by someone else. I think sometimes we get lost in our own minds. That's where the stories start to take on a life of their own in our own heads. When we start to run these things by other people and bounce it off of them, that's when we start to break open those stories and realize there's another way of thinking about them. And so one thing I think is very important to do is to start to talk to other people and test those hypotheses, test those stories, and
Yeah,
see what other people think. Not that you have to follow everything that everyone else thinks, but just see what other people think about what you're thinking and get their thoughts, especially people you trust or people who know
yeah,
you in a certain way, maybe know your working style or your talents or your strengths, and get their feedback. um, you know, do some research, get more information. I think more times than not, when people start to tell themselves what's not possible, it's because they don't have all the information they need. So I think it's really helpful to start to look at other examples of people who maybe have been on a path that you'd like to be on. Look at other examples of people. My book is full of great examples of people who've broken through all
yeah.
kinds of obstacles. Not to say that you have to buy my book and read it, but but what I did with the book was to try to give examples to show people what's possible, not necessarily that people have to do things exactly the way the people in my stories that I offer did them,
Yeah.
but just enough of a story to say, these things are possible. You can go about it in your own way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I loved it. Step back, research, take feedback from other people,
Yeah.
right? And that's the way you can challenge your perceptions. So,
Yeah.
Tammy, I would like to dig a little deeper here,
Yeah.
for the benefit of our audience. So, when we say step back, so what I understand is, maybe if you are in a chaotic environment, take a break, write few things about it, things like that. What else stepping back could mean to somebody who is kind of in the midst of a chaos, and who is facing leadership obstacles? So what can that person do as part of stepping back?
Mhm. Right. I'm glad you asked that. So, yeah, stepping back can look like a lot of different things, right? It's not
Yeah, yeah.
just taking a moment and saying, let me think about this for
Hmm.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
It might be a combination of things. So the things I already suggested, it's not just talking to one person and maybe doing a little bit of your own research. It might be talking to a variety of people and
mm-hmm.
really starting to come up with some concrete next steps of what you're going
Yeah,
to do to start to at least make some changes, doing some things differently. For some people, it might mean having to really make some dramatic changes. I'm not suggesting that people take, dramatic actions where they,
yeah,
compromise their stability and their, financial security. However, some people I know have done that because they realize they're in a situation that's really doing more harm than good. But it might be that they really do have to start to make a plan, an exit plan to leave the situation they're in order to create the reality that they want. And in fact, that is often true, that people have to make a plan. So I think the other thing I would suggest is to stay aware of the kinds of thinking that you're doing. So if you're thinking in all or nothing terms, if you're thinking that you're going to go from where you are now to something else in one step, it's never in one step. It's usually incremental. So as
Yeah.
our good friend Dory Clark talks about the long game, right? That in her most recent book, great examples in that book of people who took many different steps and looked at a variety of perspectives in order to form a thoughtful plan going forward. And I think planning is very important. So, and the other part of this is also believing in yourself, because when people are feeling stressed or they're feeling stuck or trapped in something, or they stop believing in themselves, that's when the walls are closing in and they're just not seeing what's possible. So I think the first thing you really have to do is trust yourself and believe that you can make something happen. Sometimes I also suggest look back on a time in the past when you were challenged or you were stressed. How did you move through that? Think about yourself as a problem solver. When have you moved through another challenging situation? How did you get through that? And realize you still are that person. You can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about planning, and one very important part of planning always is risk analysis, right? And I have seen that
Yes.
leaders feeling fearful about taking risks. And you have a lot of stories, as you said in your book, Work from Inside Out. What are few lessons you can share about those stories, those experiences of leaders with respect to taking risk, which can help today's audience?
Yes. So there's a chapter in the book where I highlight two women who started their careers without any credentials at all. No college, university degrees, nothing. And they both ended up pursuing corporate careers, and they stepped into their first jobs really not knowing what they were doing. And people are always afraid that they're going to be, imposters, or that they're not going to know what they're doing. And this happens at all levels of the organization, right?
Yes.
And they just decided they were going to put their best foot forward. They were going to be honest and say what they knew and what they didn't know. And they were able to be hired by somebody who said, you know what? I like your curiosity. I like your thirst for learning. That's what they presented in themselves, the desire to learn. So tap into that within yourself. You have to be hungry to learn. And I think
Yeah.
that's a real key for a lot of people, is to really want to learn in order to if you're going to take risks, you have to be open to learning. Trust that you're
Yeah.
able and capable of learning, but also realize that part of taking risks and learning is sometimes it's not always going to work out the way that you expected or hoped it will. But we've all had those experiences too, right? The art of making mistakes, the art of things not going as we expected them to.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
most things that we enter don't go as we expected them to. Now, sometimes they go even better than we expected them to.
Yes.
We
They
don't
do.
often look at those situations, do we? Because
Yeah.
we don't think
Yeah.
of those as traumatic or as negative, right? We
Yeah.
celebrate those. But the times when we hoped that something would go a certain way and it didn't, and maybe it didn't feel as good, if we can take the learning from that and take that forward, that's vitally important. And, you know, we all make mistakes. We all have things that didn't go as we expected them to. If we can
Yeah.
really embrace those, that's where the risks lie. And again, I'm not suggesting that somebody put their families at risk and their whole livelihoods at risk. I always suggest that people have, plan A is your ideal dream, right? Have that and go for it. But also have a plan B. Plan B might be have 6 months to a year's worth of resources set aside. So if things really do not go very well, you've got your living expenses covered. And then I say, even have a plan C. C means cash. Make sure you have some cash on hand to cover yourself for whatever reasons. Give yourself those cushions and that security if you're really worried about risk. I think there's always a way to keep yourself covered and trust yourself through the process of risk from a financial point of view. But there's also those risks of maybe trying something and it doesn't work out and you feel a little foolish. But what I have found, when you watch other people try things that don't work out and you watch how they gracefully then show up as people who learned, we respect that, don't we? We often will. And we actually hold those people up in high esteem as leaders because they show others how to be learners and how to learn from those and then how to move forward from those. That's leadership, actually. And so I really encourage people to step into, it's really like stepping into the unknown or stepping into uncertainty, right? And so that we all step into uncertainty, even when we take on a new job and we think we know what we're doing. We never, ever, none of us has a crystal ball. So we never, ever know exactly what we're stepping into. So we shouldn't kid ourselves in that way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Being courageous, being vulnerable. That's what, my takeaways from this point was being courageous, being vulnerable, and the learning attitude.
Right.
And, last question you said, which resonated in this particular part also, having set of people around you where you can bounce ideas, where you can discuss things, where you can learn and unlearn with them. I think that's very important whenever you face obstacles. So it's very important. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what else? If you want to show up as a leader, you can think of taking risks as being a service to those who might be following you or watching your example, because you can set the example for other people to experiment and try new things. The only way we're going to make progress is by trying new things and testing things. There's the expression, progress, not perfection, right? How do we make progress?
Not linear. Yeah. And progress is not linear, right? That's the key message. It's not linear. Any progress.
Not at all. Not at all.
Cool. Thank you, Tammy. As we are coming towards the end of our conversation, please share how can people find your book? Amazing book. I have read this book and it's amazing. How can they find your book and how can they reach you if they want to?
Well, my book is on Amazon and it's on Amazon internationally. So it's available wherever you can access Amazon. It's also in independent bookstores and public libraries. And my website, TammyGoolerLoeb.com. And I believe I'm the only Tammy Gooler Loeb in the world. So even if you mess up the spelling, you should be able to find me.
And you should not mess up with the spellings because that website is already in the show notes of this LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live and Facebook Live. So it's already there in the show notes. Thank you so much, Tammy, for sharing your valuable insights and help people. How can they be more successful in their leadership journey? Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Same here. Thanks to all of you who are watching us, listening to us. For all of you, Tammy had a special gift, which the link of that is already there in the show notes, but I just want to talk about that. So that gift is a complimentary workbook, which you can access on our website, as she said, tammygoolerloeb.com/workbook. And thank you so much. Do download that workbook. It will help you, I think, designing your career and breaking through the obstacles. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live. And if you are watching this as a recording, thanks to you too. I hope you have got value from this and you will keep applying these learnings. See you all again in the next episode of Growth Mindset Conversation. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, Tammy. Bye, everyone.